Can I just use Claude Code to build an AI SOC today?
I think the bolt-on approach is tough. Like if you're really looking for good outcomes, you really need to think about an approach starting from first principles with the data. And it's well more than just logs and event data. It's config, code context, it's bringing it all together. I think it's going well beyond what SIEMs are capable of.
If the future is like more AI coming into more parts of security, should people start rethinking how they build SOC teams?
I really think the future is where security engineers become full stack. You're not an analyst. Like, look, your best analyst doesn't want to be the guy that's just doing investigations.
Every time someone tells me the statement that I can just use Claude Code and build my own AI SOC, these days I just laugh because I think there's a lot more involved in doing this. Look at all the vibe coding examples that are out there. So for this particular conversation, I have Ariful, who is from Exaforce. We spoke about what does it actually take to build an AI SOC, and can I truly just use any AI? It doesn't really matter, Claude Code or any other favorite model of yours, to build my own AI SOC. We spoke about some of the unspoken parts which are not usually covered in a lot of marketing that Sam Altman may be doing about how easy it is with AI. What are some of the complexities around building this part? Now, if you are someone who's running a SOC team and probably feeling the pressure like everyone else around the world on, hey, I want you to use more AI, this conversation would be one way to understand what parts of SOC are possible with AI and what parts are more probably a bit more complex in the kind of workforce you require to support that. And the reality is a lot more complex answer than slapping Claude Code and calling it AI SOC. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. And if you know someone who is in the SOC team or probably building a SOC team working around them, I would definitely share this episode with them because we went into the details of what's under the hood for building an AI SOC, what are some of the challenges, things you have to consider when you build this yourself, and what kind of a team would you be building as we all move forward in this AI future. As always, if you're here for a second or third time and have been finding the episodes valuable, I would really appreciate if you can take 1 second to just drop that follow or subscribe button on whichever platform, Apple, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, that you're listening or watching this. It means that we get discovered by a lot more people and get to help a lot more people as well. So I appreciate you taking that quick second to do that. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Ariful, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace. Hello, welcome to another episode of Cloud Security Podcast. I've got Ariful with me. Hey, man, thanks for coming on the show.
Of course, it's a pleasure. Long time. It's been.
I know.
This.
We've hung out quite a bit together, and I know a bit about you as well. So maybe to introduce yourself to the audience, your professional background, where are you these days?
Yeah, I started a company called Exaforce about a couple of years ago. Prior to that, I was at Palo Alto Networks in the Prisma Cloud team, and I ended up there because of an acquisition of my last startup, Apparato. We were one of the many acquisitions that Palo Alto Networks made. So as part of the Prism Cloud business, kind of saw that grow quite significantly. Prior to that, I did actually another startup, and I started my career at Juniper Networks in network switching, routing, and security. But yeah, my latest sort of endeavor is Exaforce, and we're building AI SOC, so essentially agentic SOC platform.
Awesome. I think AI SOC is definitely top of mind. At least the topic that I had in mind for this as well. In the advisory work that I do with Fortune 500 and FTSE 100 companies, a lot of times when I talk about AI SOC, common things that come up, and maybe it's Sam Altman talking through these people, but can I just use Claude Code, which is supposed to be a super awesome advanced version of AI, to build an AI SOC today, considering you've done this yourself?
Yeah, look, I think if the goal is to kind of vibe code your way into building a SOC platform, look, I think I want to start by saying that I think this technology is incredibly powerful. Yeah. Whether you think about Claude Code or just Claude in general, right? Yeah. I think these technologies are really, really powerful. Just me as a product person, I think it's given me superpowers, things that I would have never imagined myself as a product person do. For instance, just over the weekend, I'm coming up with some demo scenarios for a customer. I'm doing things like session hijacking, so I can actually potentially demonstrate how we can detect it, or even things like building integrations, like exploring APIs and that kind of stuff. Like these are things that typically me as a product manager, I wouldn't be doing 5-6 years ago because we just didn't have the skill sets, right? I mean, we don't have, all of us don't have a coding background. So I want to start by saying that, but I think to the heart of your question, which is, can you really use this technology to build a SOC platform, to build tooling? I think you can do some things, but at the end of the day, I think it boils down to, from a builder perspective, I think it boils down to how much do you want to manage yourself as well. Like if you're starting from scratch, starting from like, if you think about a SOC, you got to start from, building a data platform, and then you have to build a lot of things on top of it. If you're really starting from scratch, I would say, that's from a management perspective and resourcing perspective, that might not be worthwhile. I think the second part of this is how can we leverage LLMs to perform tasks in the SOC? That I think is interesting as well. That is sort of like, hey, can we give SOC analysts superpowers to perform their tasks in the SOC? I think there's a lot of things to be done there. So yeah, that's my kind of perspective.
Oh, because I guess to your point, there is a whole AI for security and security for AI conversation here as well, where to your point, if the SOC team wanted to bolt on AI into an existing workflow for security operation, then yes, you can go far. I don't know what that far would be, but on the other side, if you're using AI for security from a scaling perspective to, hey, I only have, I don't know, I'm a head of SOC or a director here. I only get budget for 5 people, but I wonder what would have happened if I had just enough budget for 10 more, 20 more, 30 more, whatever that number may be. I think that's kind of where the amplification of AI is a great sales pitch at that point in time from Sam Altman. Like, oh, you guys can do anything. He's been pitching the whole $1 billion company on that. Maybe to kind of bring it to ground level, considering you've done this, what is involved in, you kind of mentioned a few words there. You mentioned the data lake, you mentioned, because a lot of people who are probably in the thick of it, like especially if you work as a SOC analyst, all you see is a SIEM, you get some threat intel feed, and I'm like, I can bolt some AI on top of this and should be enough. Is that like I don't know, to your point, is that vibe coding still, or am I getting closer?
Yeah, look, I think there are aspects that you can certainly bolt on. You can certainly build tooling. You can certainly do some level of scripting, right?
Yep, yep.
I think the way I think about this I was actually drawing some analogies because I was explaining this to somebody with the autonomous vehicle market. If you kind of think about Tesla, Waymo, these companies, they're not building bolt-on autonomous vehicles. They have taken the journey of actually building an autonomous vehicle. Now, granted, like for instance, if you look at Waymo, they've got a Jaguar car, but they've built the infrastructure into the car.
Yep.
Tesla obviously has taken a much more kind of vertically integrated approach. But all that to say, they're spending R&D in kind of building the underlying infrastructure, the cameras and everything. And then they're doing the data collection, they're doing the training, and then they're building the autonomous. Now, you can see that they're probably the ones that are making the most progress. And these are incredibly difficult problems to solve, right? So I think you can draw some analogies there because, when you take a bolt-on approach, you don't own a lot of things. You have to rely on things that are given to you. So I really think if you're trying to think about solving this problem, you got to think about first principles. And you mentioned this during the conversation. So like you got to start with the data, right? So how do I bring all of this data together? And I think, in our industry, specifically when it comes to operations, we've thought about data primarily from events, logs. But I really think that to kind of solve this problem of whether you think about alert fatigue, building better detections, better triage, you really need to give context. And it's well more than just logs and event data. It's config, code context. It's bringing it all together, right? So I think that's critical to solve. And I think it's going well beyond what SIEMs are capable of. Actually, you still need the SIEM capability, but it's actually, you need to go a step beyond, right? Because SIEMs have typically just been based on logs and events. So you start with the data, and then obviously you've got a lot of the tasks that you perform in the SOC. And I think to build an AI native kind of SOC, you need to think about how do you think about tasks, every task that you have in the SOC, how do you build it in an AI native way? So let me give you a few examples. Start with detections, right? Because, hey, you need to have detection coverage within the SOC. So if you start with detections, you still need statistical modeling, those sorts of things to do anomaly-based detections. And historically, they've been noisy, right? Yeah. But I think what's happening is with AI capability today, where, if you think about AI SOC and AI analysts, this notion of being able to triage every alert becomes a possibility. So you can leverage things like anomaly detection, where you can be liberal in terms of the number of signals you look at, and you can throw machine at the problem to triage all of these alerts and only surface what really requires human attention. And that can be based on context that you have, context that you feed it, like, potentially how your business operates, right? So that's one example from a detection perspective. You think about triage, investigations, response. I think every single one of these layers has an AI native way to operate. If you think about triage, it's being able to automatically triage alerts and only escalate what you need. But again, you have to give the agent context, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you want to remove the guesswork, right? So you can give you predictable outcomes, right?
Yeah.
Investigations, you need a co-pilot experience because let's face it, right? Like if you're doing an investigation, you really need a way to get started. And today, like if you're trying to query for something, it's incredibly difficult, right? You have to go build these queries. So you need a co-pilot experience there. And then from a response perspective, it's not just about building playbooks, but how do you think about agentic ways to solve multi-step kind of response workflows, right? These are not static steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. They can be very dynamic in nature. Long answer, but I think the bolt-on approach is tough. Like if you're really looking for good outcomes, you really need to think about an approach starting from first principles with the data and how do you build AI native capabilities into every single task that you perform.
I think a few points over there which you called out, which is really interesting. I love the analogy for traditionally we have always relied on whatever your SIEM provider is. Most organizations with SOC, even with managed SOC, they all have some form of SIEM provider that integrates into some parts or all parts of your at least crown jewel. So there is that notion that, oh, okay, if there's an event, and probably it's a running joke in the industry as well, send me all the logs. And that usually just means like send me all the events, debug logs, everything log. And it gets into this costly affair. Cost is just a big thing in SOC in general. But to what you said about the detection piece as well, which usually takes a long time. So that's where the co-pilot piece comes in as well. I'm a new threat hunter. I want to be able to find out, I don't know, not just cloud. Like I've always worked with AWS. I have no idea how Azure works or GCP works. Now the organization has decided, hey, SOC is gonna take care of all the alerts coming out of Azure and GCP and all of that.
Yeah.
And to your point, it's almost like each stage as you refer to it, I'm like, yeah, I guess it's like to quote unquote AI SOC is a lot more than just, hey, I can triage, right?
Right.
Because I feel like there's a lot of what people may be thinking about when they think about bolting on Claude Code or whatever into, and that's my quote unquote agentic SOC. It's not the full picture. It's just like, oh, you're just doing one part. There's
Correct.
like so much more to this than like, hey, to your point about does the SIEM have the right information? Do you have all the data and the context required from all the integration point? I mean, would SaaS be like, I don't know, is that because I mean we have only spoke about like traditional infrastructure. There's like these days there's nothing is traditional with AI. There's so much more SaaS and everything else as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think with most enterprises today, actually, this is a fact. So in our organization, if we look at, we use our own technology. We're building the SOC platform. We're using it to protect ourselves.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
gives us some interesting data points that I'm learning over time. One of them is our IaaS and SaaS logs. Actually, our IaaS logs, specifically public cloud, right,
yeah.
are 100x the volume of everything else.
Right.
It's astronomical. It really is, because just so much data exists, right?
Yeah.
And so, to your point, when you say evolution of IaaS, SaaS, how this is impacting the SOC, I think if you think about just from a data perspective, it is putting tremendous pressure on architectures, choices that you have made in the past, to evolving to leveraging the same technology and tooling for cloud and SaaS. Yeah.
I think I was gonna, because I mean obviously you guys got awarded that AWS award for part startup as well, and one of the more popular services on Amazon. First of all, congratulations on it, and
Thank
good
you.
on you for you guys for winning that. I was gonna say from AWS building an AI capability in AWS usually lands on the whole Amazon Bedrock thing. And I think before all of this, we were talking about the whole how you guys have been talking about Bedrock and what are some of the best practices around, especially now that Amazon is also recognizing that, hey, you're doing more AI on AWS. What has your experience been on building, and what some of the best practices probably you can share on building AI capability on Amazon Bedrock?
Yeah, look, I think Bedrock is incredibly beneficial for when you start building on AWS, because it's a service that exists in AWS, so it's a native service, you can leverage it. So and actually from a customer perspective, because the service is hosted within AWS infrastructure, all your data stays within AWS infrastructure as well, which is quite beneficial, right? Especially when you're starting to build, AI technology, data residency, sovereignty, all that sort of question comes into play. And I think there's some advantages there in terms of Bedrock being hosted in AWS. So I think those are I would say, easy decisions. Like, okay, great. Like we're building, let's start with the service that's already available. But it's not just about Bedrock, right?
Yeah.
If you're trying to build a robust agentic system, it goes well beyond the capabilities of what Bedrock offers. Like some simple examples, right? So if you're building an agentic system, you have a number of agents, you're trying to handle things like, okay, if these agents have retry mechanisms, say for instance, tasks that these agents perform are to reach out to third-party systems or to individuals, wherever it may be, building retries. That's a very, very simple example, but some things that you have to think about. So, most people have started with things like an agentic framework, like LangChain and others that they've used on top of technologies like Bedrock. We've looked at these technologies. We actually had to, at the end of the day, our engineering team, this is more of an engineering conversation. They've decided that some of it is open source, some of it is built in-house, because just kind of building this enterprise technology required us to do that. So yes, I talked about retries, like even things like asynchronous processing. Like say for instance, you perform a set of tasks. Your agent is reaching out. Do you want to do it sequentially, or do you want to do it in an asynchronous way so you can perform these tasks in a short time span? Perhaps one of the tasks is taking longer than the other, right? So there's a lot of sort of things that we have to take into account. Upgrades. You're upgrading software. Your agents are off doing something. Are they all going to retry? Are they all going to restart? Like you have to handle all these scenarios. So I think there's quite a bit of work that we have to do. Obviously Bedrock allowed us to get started really quick, which is the benefit of cloud, right? But then there's all this other infrastructure that you have to build.
Is there something, because I think obviously building in Bedrock, you guys are building an agentic AI SOC capability on Amazon. Obviously, there's a lot more moving parts than just building on Bedrock. And I'm going to use the same analogy as what we're talking about, Claude Code. Just like bolt on Claude Code to Bedrock, and you have AI capability. In terms of people who are skeptical on the whole, hey, I can do that with SIEM, because I think is this wrong to kind of imagine that that a SIEM provider that I have been using for a while, because you mentioned the part earlier about events and the different kinds of logging. So in an agentic SOC kind of world, if people are trying to build that capability on their own, what kind of data people should be looking for? So should they be still looking at event, or not look at events at all? Because I imagine as you guys are building this yourself, you would have had some learning about what works, what doesn't work, because it's a big claim to kind of say that, hey, SIEM's not good enough anymore.
Yeah, it is. And it's not to say that we're it's a ding against any of the SIEM providers. I think I was just thinking about this even last night. Like it's an evolution of technology. How did SIEMs evolve? How did SIEMs even get started? They started, Splunk got started as a log analytics platform, and then they built a security application on top of that because the logs were there, right? But I think let's come back to your question. Yes, there's incredible learning that we've had, and I'll start with the simple stuff. Like when you're thinking about, like, even in our journey, right? In our first year of building Exaforce, we actually started with we started the company in 2023. So, height of inflated expectations as far as what these technologies could do, right? So we're like, okay, let's get detections from third-party sources and let's leverage LLMs to go triage them. And the results that we're getting, unpredictable, not, precise, and not to what we were thinking we would get. And it really boiled down to, again, what you just said, the data, right? So let's unpeel that a little bit. What does it really mean? So when you think about, I'll give you a simple example. Let's say you're trying to troubleshoot something. Let's start with the detection, right? If you have a detection, say you're trying to do insider threat, right? And one of the behaviors insider threat is somebody potentially, without edit permissions to a file, copying those files and then making them public. Now imagine yourself trying to build a detection for that. You just have to think about, okay, there's an event, yeah, potentially making it public, but I need config information on the resource, and I need permission information to figure out, does this person have edit permissions, and then does he make it? One example, right? You think about many other examples in terms of cloud infrastructure. You're trying to troubleshoot something. Somebody made say somebody called your S3 bucket and it was anomalous, right? Okay, who is this somebody? Who spun up this S3 bucket? What was in this S3 bucket?
Yeah.
What specific keys were accessed? So I think the sum of it is, we feel in order to really solve these problems, it's a combination of, again, logs, events,
Yeah.
config data, code context, and you have to kind of bring it all together. So you can really, what you can do is you can give LLMs the right context. So you can remove the guesswork. Like
Yeah.
even if you think about me and you, right? If you ask me a question, it's really vague, and you're like, directionally, I'm thinking he's going to give me this answer, but my thought process is just going to go like, there's many different ways it could go, right? So
Yeah.
the answer I'm going to give you, and potentially between two different people, very different. But if
Yeah.
you remove the guesswork and you gave me, some level of preciseness, and you gave me some reasoning freedom, you'd probably get a decent answer, even between two people, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do with these LLMs. We try to remove the guesswork by giving it the context, which again includes all of this data. Hopefully that gives you an appreciation
It
of
does.
sort of.
But what about, like, obviously there's a lot of people who have we were at a panel, so I was part of a panel yesterday called for AI security and how to build AI security in an enterprise and regulated environment. One of the questions we came across was I think the moderator asked the crowd, who here is not using AI today? Instead of asking who's using AI, so because imagine like 4 or 5 years ago, that
Yes.
answer would have like no one would have like, what, who uses AI? Like, what are you, crazy? But the response was as expected. No one raised a hand that no one's not using AI. And I kind of feel the same here in a way where a lot of people have gone down the path of AI in some way, shape, or form. So when we say data lake, they're probably already thinking that, oh, I mean, yeah, Arif said you don't need to have like a SIEM, but I have that data platform thing that gives me security orchestration, everything all built. All I need to have some threat detection. Now I know that I need the 4 kinds of logs. As long as I have that information, I should be able to do that. Now, was there any learning there in that data lake world as well that you kind of, because I imagine you guys would have to, as you said, for lack of a better word, you're drinking your own champagne. So you're also building your own data lake as well. What was that like?
Yeah. Look, I think, there's a tremendous amount of learning. And actually, to be honest, like some of it came after, because there
All
were some
right.
decisions that the engineering team made, and we were like, oh, I don't know why they made that decision. But we were like, oh, yeah, it's because they actually wanted to solve this problem in a very, very scalable way. So yeah, I can peel the onion a little bit. Like I think, if you think about most people today, if you're thinking about building a data lake, maybe you're considering something like Snowflake or something like that. Like, okay, let's put all this data in Snowflake. Let's run a bunch of queries, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of an over rotation there, to be quite honest. And I'll tell you why. It's because, vendors like Snowflake, they'll charge you based on processing. Storage cost of Snowflake is actually not something that you should really worry about too much. They actually charge, which is a great business model for them, right? Because you're doing work, so you're going to get charged for it. Now
Yeah.
imagine you're building a SIEM on top of Snowflake. So every time you run a query, every time you do a detection, anything you do, you're going to get charged for it. So there are some very interesting dynamics here, right? So for us, we thought about kind of solving this problem. We had to think about, okay, how can we decouple ourselves where we can leverage this technology? Snowflake is incredibly valuable for us. It plays a
Yeah.
really critical part. But at the same time, when I'm trying to solve this problem in a scalable way where I need hot and cold storage, I need to think about hot very differently. I don't have to go back to Snowflake, right? So we had to come up with a kind of a different database architecture where hot data stays in memory, really fast in memory querying for this data. And then cold storage, we leverage a combination of Snowflake plus Iceberg, which can work on top of S3 for historical data, right? So
Yeah.
those are some choices we made. But again, even if I step back a little bit, why did we even make these choices? Because at the end of the day, like there's trade-offs you end up making in terms of cost versus how much data. And I think these are choices people have to make today, right?
Yeah.
To your earlier point, SIEMs have existed for some time. Why should we even rethink some of these things? The things that we are hearing from some of our customers, a lot of our customers, they start with they have an existing SIEM. They leverage us as a technology alongside a SIEM.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we're learning from some of these customers, I'll give you two examples. One is an existing customer has a SIEM, they start to send all of their cloud data into their SIEM, and they realize the SIEM bill is just growing astronomically. And then they're like, you know what? This architecture isn't working for us. I need an augmentation technology because at least for the foreseeable future, I can save a significant amount of money by just removing those cloud logs away from my existing SIEM. And they've leveraged our technology to just do some of those things. That's one example. Another example is it's a flip side. A customer who was scared, they didn't want to put their cloud logs in their SIEM. They put it all in S3 and they were using Athena. 50 minutes to 1 hour to run queries in Athena.
Wow.
Right? That's the pain that they're running into because they want to save money. They want to put all these logs in their SIEM, right? So then obviously in this case, this customer had a egregious issue, which we helped them with. We onboarded all their logs into our system, did a lot of the work for them, helped them through this problem. But all that to say, these are some of the choices that people have to make. These are the choices we had to make, right? Like cost versus performance, and some innovation that we've done here, like being able to think about in-memory data for hot querying of data, as well as cold storage for historical purposes.
I think one thing I'm taking away from this is that security operation as a field is constantly processing. It's almost like, I mean, we talk about real time so much in SOC. So to your point about if you have a data lake, like I'm just going to use the Snowflake example, the places where people say, oh, having a data lake is quite expensive. And because I'm hearing a lot of security people say that Snowflake is expensive, is because to your point, I didn't realize this, but because it's a constant processing.
Correct.
It's not the data. It's like live feed is coming in. I want runtime data right now.
Exactly.
That's being processed every second. So no wonder it's costing so much to do that. Whereas on the flip,
the real-time data processing is the critical thing here.
Yeah, because I mean, security operation as a team, field, whatever you want to call it, it relies on the whole runtime security. It wants it to be more real time. As real time, if it happens right now, that very second, I want to find out. And I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't even think. I guess to your point, on the flip, when engineering and other people use it, they're not using it for constant processing. They're like, applications running fine. I'm like, oh, there's a very different approach. And I think maybe this is where maybe the data lake is a very different conversation. I wonder if it expands onto some of the other like detection and stuff as well, where I'm trying to build some detection, because I also find detection coverage as a whole, and obviously you need to be a certain stage of an organization to begin into detection, but detection coverage as a whole as a whole seems to have some blind sides as well, because a lot of SIEMs may not have integrations to everything. And I wonder if you had some thoughts there as well as you guys were building all those capabilities.
Yeah. And it's again, incredible learnings, right? And I would say in detections, what we're seeing most organizations is specifically, you brought up the whole point of SaaS, right? How is SaaS impacting the SOC? I think think about GitHub, think about OpenAI, Snowflake, Google Workspace. These are incredibly important data sources. Critical data, is sitting in these data sources. But actually, none of them that I mentioned, if I am correct, none of them have native detection capabilities. GitHub has no native threat detection capabilities, right? So if you have a personal access token, SSH key, somebody takes it, it's compromised, you got to have your own detections to go figure those sorts of things out, right? So what we realized is there's an opportunity for us to help these organizations with detection coverage, specifically when it comes to these sources. Like endpoint email, it's a solved problem, right? For that, we actually don't go try to build detections for endpoint email because, hey, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, they're doing a really good job. Let's go ahead and use that, right? Email, we've got a dozen solutions. So we focused on SaaS. But I think to come to your point, let's think about the example of SIEM and how could you have used a SIEM versus some of the things that we're doing. I think it really boils down to domain-specific understanding of data. Because if you're trying to build detections, you really need to understand these data platforms, right? You can think about, GWS has its own intricacies. GitHub has its own intricacies. You need to understand the events, the resources that are in every single one of these data sources. And by building that domain-specific knowledge, which, the way I categorize this is you build domain-specific knowledge by not looking at just the auto log data, but the config, the resources and everything, right? And in GitHub, it's actually code context as well. By building this knowledge, you can build very good detections, right? And it's still very difficult, right? You have to understand these, in the case of GitHub, you have to understand personal access tokens and all these things. And then you have to figure out how could we detect potential anomalies? So now you have to build statistical models on top of these things, right? And then you have to figure out what is potentially anomalous. So we have actually invested a great amount of time doing this work because we think it's valuable, and we have the data to do that for you, right? If you try to go do this in a SIEM, I think you would need a very strong, big data detection engineering team to just go to this. And not all SIEMs will even give you the capabilities to go build anomaly detection the way I'm thinking about this, right? Like, because it's hard for you to just build rule-based detections for some of these things, right? Because none of these things are just like, okay, step one, this happens, step two, this happens, okay, it fires. Like, no, it's much more complex, right?
Yeah. And I guess the key point over there is that having that understanding of, like, I'm thinking even from a GitHub perspective as well, people who may have the fortune of having an enterprise license or GitHub Advanced Security, even then, that's still limited capability in terms of what it offers and how far it can go, because detection is not just about, to what you said, maybe a key was compromised, but it has gone ahead and gone into a cloud environment. Something has happened there. You're trying to pull these 4 or 5 different strings together to make some sense of what is happening here, or where did this originate, to even get to the point that there was a secret left in GitHub that caused it. Like,
Yes.
it's a long kill chain you're trying to follow to get to that point. And I think it's worthwhile calling out, because I'm like, the more I am trying to kind of unravel or unwrap this thing for people about the idea of, hey, I can just slap a Claude Code and make it build an AI SOC. Already spoke about so many capabilities that you have to build across. And I'm thinking more for people who are obviously leading these teams, building these teams, who have a lot of pressure from their higher ups to go, hey, I use AI. Don't talk to me if you're not using AI. Find a way to figure out AI into this kind of a thing as well. One of the things, and as you kind of touched on this, is the whole hallucinating with the whole answers. Like, and you kind of said, hey, use your context. That kind of is a great part. The other part is, and being such a critical part of the organization, where we were talking about runtime, real time alerts coming in, it's quite important to be able to identify the true positive really quickly and be able to jump on it straight away, which brings up the question of trust and transparency as well. And in an AI world where it's like a running joke. It's like the whole Amazon S3 bucket public joke. It's the same joke with AI. It's like, oh, it's going to give me a different answer. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want a different answer for the same problem 3 times, because I'm like, is this a false positive? Yes. And you ask 5 minutes later, maybe it is. Like, what do you think? And like, I don't know. You tell me. You have the context. So I have this argument with AI. How do you find people solve that trust and transparency thing in this?
Yeah. Look, I think there's no easy answer, right? There's no like magic pixie dust and great, you have like trust in the system. I think trust comes in a number of ways. And we've learned that obviously it comes with transparency. So you provide every aspect of the decision that you make. So the agent, the decisions make, the data that it relies on, and being able to provide all of that, not having to say, hey, if you want to know the answer to this, go back to some other data platform, run a bunch of queries, get that data, and then try to correlate. That's really tough, right? That's when you're asking people to do work, do context switching and that kind of stuff. So you have to provide all of the data, all of the relevant questions you've answered to get that transparency, right? I think transparency is an aspect. I think more than that, it's also the question of like this false positive versus true positive. How do you measure this? How do you make it better, right?
Yeah.
How do you make it better over time? To start with, we as an organization, we had a dedicated team. We started as a small team, but their entire goal was to look through these detections and figure out, as a human, and see, hey, is this really a true positive versus false positive? And we started labeling. We started figuring, okay, we could make these improvements. We could do that. We could answer these additional questions. That's how we started this. And what we realized over time is, for some time, like, and again, going back to the example of autonomous vehicles, you didn't see Waymo vehicles drive autonomously for quite some time. You saw them with somebody inside the vehicle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's the phase that we are in the SOC, in my opinion, where you still need you need people to be driving, right? We started with that. So when we went to customers, we would have a team of people review these things, and they would be able to figure out, okay, what is potentially mislabeled or something of that nature. And what we decided was we were going to grow that as an MDR team. So it's a managed detection and response team that helps customers with better outcomes, but it's also helping us build a better product, right? So we invest. So that's one way we help people gain trust, and also for us to build better technology, right? The second aspect of this is, how do you keep continuously learning to get better results? And so that is historical data that you have. Like, so detections that you fired in the past, if you classify these detections as something that is, false positive, how do you maintain that information? And how do you use that information for future outcomes? So you have to solve that problem. And lastly, it's about context of your environment. We call it business context. So if I go into an organization, can you give me information about your organization that really helps the system understand your business? It can be knowledge bases. It can be what you can define it as a prompt in the system, right? And it really helps the system sort of every time it goes through and troubleshoots, it leverages these answers. It's a long-winded answer, but I really wanted to, because I get this question from customers as well. And the answer is there's no easy answer, right? Like it's a combination of all these things that we end up doing that helps us get better results over time.
I mean, if the future is like more AI coming into more parts of security, uh, should people start rethinking how they build SOC teams and architect this thing as well?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think this is where it's really good learning for us, kind of taking what we built going into the market, right? I really think, having heard this from a few customers that we're working with now, that I would consider, these growth stage companies, that just like what you just said, it's like, hey, if I were rethinking this, how should I think about it, right?
Yeah.
And I was kind of asking them the same question. And I think the answer is like, hey, I've built a SOC in the past where I bought a SIEM, I hired detection engineers, I hired analysts. And I know what it takes to go do that, right? Huge upfront investment in terms of capital, headcount, and potential value may not come for a little bit of time, because when you're thinking about staffing and building tooling and operationalizing, it may take you more than a year, right? So they're rethinking this process. They're like, how do I think about this in the age of AI, right? How do I think about an AI native platform that can augment my small team? And my small team is not a team of analysts. My small team is a team of what I'm starting to realize is full stack security engineers. These are engineers that perform all of the other security engineering tasks, but they are leveraging technology to help them on the operation side. Remove all of the mundane work, remove the things that you typically have to end up doing, but you're actually doing the real high quality work in terms of actual threats and things that you want to go look at, right? So I really think the future is where security engineers become full stack. You're not an analyst. Like, look, your best analyst doesn't want to be the guy that's just looking at doing investigations. Your best analyst is probably somebody who's incredibly valuable for the organization in many other ways, right? So how do you use that person to do other things within the organization? Obviously, you can leverage technology like this. And I think the other thing that I thought about is specifically, like, even for myself, right? Like, you want to be a builder. So if you're in the SOC, leverage AI to be a builder and a better defender, right? Not do the mundane tasks. So I think these are things that I see security leaders think about, right? When they hire individuals, at least the organizations we're working with, where they're rethinking this, they're not hiring analysts. They're hiring individuals that can perform all these tasks, right? Because they're going to leverage a combination of human talent and AI.
Do you think that the place where SOC is going in 2026 is a lot more engineers, like security engineers, who are a lot more full stack, or maybe a bit more experienced in? It's not, I guess, to your point, after a certain point, I wouldn't want to say level 100, level 1, but more like the initial bits of true positive, false positive, that thing that people used to hate about security operation analyst job. And trying to identify a true positive or false positive in the middle of the night is probably even worse, because you're like 24/7 on as well.
Correct.
And especially when you have an AI agent which can do that, I almost feel like I can see why there is this excitement for a lot of security operations teams to feel that, hey, maybe I can AI agent this thing and I don't have to be awake at 3 a.m. And a lot of that this conversation kind of came out of that thing where I want people to love their job, but at the same time, I also realize there's a reason why the SOC analyst tenure is so small, because no one wants to be a night shift person for the rest of their life, like, as exciting as it may sound. So for people who are kind of reimagining this, to what you said about looking at engineers who are, where I'm going with this is that what kind of people should they be hiring? Is it a full stack engineer as well? Because obviously you have bigger goals because you're building the product yourself. But on the flip side, a lot of people, that's just a function in their organization. So should they be still considering a full security engineer who kind of is like cross? I don't know. I'm obviously cannot be an AppSec person. Well, I don't know. It'll be really amazing if like a SOC person, AppSec person, everything combines into one. But what kind of people should they be hiring for in that new world?
Yeah, look, I think I think it is going to be the way I see this is it's a talent that is cross-functional in nature, at least in these small organizations. The way I'm seeing it, I don't see in a lot of these small organizations you have dedicated analysts. We're working with a number of them right now,
Yeah.
right? So these are organizations with, I would say, a head of security, maybe 2 to 3 people, or even a bit more, maybe even 3 to 4,
Yeah.
but not a dedicated operations person, right? A person that and this is an individual, so they have engineering tasks and they have the operations tasks they're leveraging. So I think if you think about it, if you're a CISO, like you're getting this off the ground, you're going to get questioned on how much headcount you're going to go have to hire, right? And so it boils down to how can I be much more efficient, right? So my answer is yes. I think it is going to be someone who has a combination of talent, and I think it gives the analysts, people that have been analysts in the past, the freedom to think about, I don't have to be just an analyst anymore. I can be much more than that, right? So I'm not saying that, just because you're an analyst, no, your job is at stake. I think it's an opportunity for you to actually do many other things to leverage the talent that you have in performing many other tasks that you typically weren't given the ability to perform.
That's right. I think in all the conversations that I've had with multiple companies across Fortune 500 as well, it's the junior staff that have had the most, or not junior, but the people who have a bit of experience, like 2 to 3 years experience. They're the ones who are getting the most value from all these AI tools because they kind of know something. They have the drive that I want that senior role, but I've been in the industry for a couple of years and I want to be able to go to that next level. And to your point, maybe it's from a analyst role to a senior analyst or a principal analyst role. And I think you know the questions to ask. You don't want to bother your senior person. So that's definitely a great opportunity for them to go down the path of. I can obviously talk about this whole agentic world for a long time, but I also wanted to ask you, that's the tech questions I had. I've got some fun questions for you as well. I've got 3 fun questions. So the first one being, what do you spend most time on when you're not trying to solve agentic AI problems in the world?
Oh man, that's a that's a tough one because when you're building a company, it's 24/7. But yeah, look, I do have other passions. I love running. It's my way of sort of like, just zoning out a little bit. So I'm kind of religious about running 5 to 6 days a week. And so I do spend on the Saturday mornings, going out for a long run and enjoying nature. And I've got kids. So I've got kids and a family. So I have to spend some time with them. So honestly, like that's really my life. Like it's building the company, it's pursuing some passion that I have, which, at this moment it's been running, and obviously spending time with my family. That's really
Fair.
I'm not trying to dissuade any founders, but that is the reality.
The balance is quite hard. Yeah, fair. I mean, the second question is, what is something that you're proud of that is not on your social media? Yeah, I think it could be anything. Because some people say family, some people say, I mean, obviously everyone has different kind of experience in their life, but whatever comes to your top of mind.
Yeah, I can't. It's a tough one for me to just think about off the top. Honestly, I'm not a big social media person. So, I mean, my biggest thing is on LinkedIn. So I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook. Actually, I'm not on Facebook.
Well, you're already Gen Z, man. But so fair.
I moved on.
Sorry?
I've moved on.
We've moved on. I think we've moved on way before. I mean, all the boomers and the millennials are still hanging out, holding on to Facebook as it's like that's our place to hang out. I mean, but I mean, it's it's different for different people. So I appreciate you that. The final question I have for you is, what's your favorite restaurant or cuisine that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think, I've traveled. I've had the fortune of traveling quite a bit. I really love Mediterranean cuisine.
Ooh.
So I think one of my favorite food destinations in the world is actually Turkey. So yeah, I really think the flavors and how it all comes together is amazing. So yeah, I'm a big foodie, by the way. So we should definitely talk about food more.
Yeah, we should hold dedicated episode on. I mean, I at this point in time, I was being told after 6 years of getting everyone's food choices, I should just write a blog of like the favorite cybersecurity, the favorite food choices for most cybersecurity people. Like I can run an LLM over it now and
Yeah.
figure out what the patterns are, the favorite restaurants as well.
Yeah.
But I think I agree on the whole Turkish food as well, because they had this. I remember that was the only place that we were catching a flight from. My wife and I were catching a flight from, I think, Portugal to Istanbul,
Mm.
and people were having milk, like grown-up adults were having milk, and I was trying to figure out why are they.
Oh, they're not having milk.
Yeah, and I'm like, what's
They're
this
having
milk thing
raku,
that
right?
these adults are having? I'm like,
Raki.
I understand kids having milk, but then I mean, and for people who kind of are from that region of gone there, they probably would know this. It's like this, because as a country, Turkey doesn't have a lot of vegetables and stuff, so this is like their fiber, for lack of a better word. It's like not kafir. They call it something. It's like
Okay,
basically
okay.
it's like a milk drink that you have with food, because you're eating so much meat and everything else. You need some
Yeah.
fiber.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
they also have this alcohol which is very milk. It's got a murky color. I don't know if you've had that.
Yeah, I know. I just can't remember the name of it, but essentially, for people obviously who listen in or tune in and are into food, I'll definitely recommend checking out this milk drink that adults have in Turkey. Which
I've
is,
had it. Yeah.
oh yeah, I can't
I've
remember.
had it.
Like I
It's a
remember.
yogurt. It's a yogurt. It's
Yeah,
actually
it's like a
across the
yogurt
Middle East.
base.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a smoothie. It's not. It's like a very. It's hard to
It's like
explain.
it's like lassi, but it's not sweet. It's the salty version.
Yeah, that's right. I just can't remember the name of it, but essentially, it's like that. You just see adults having like grown-up adults, like really older people, and I'm like, I just got so curious. I was asking the air, I said, what is this thing that these people are having? Like, oh, you mean? Oh, I just clearly can't remember the name of it, but essentially, oh my, oh yeah, that I'll have that. And like to what you said, it's like, oh my god, like it's just like it was definitely. It was gonna bother me for a while, but anyway, people who get to this part of the episode and find out and they remember the thing, please leave it as a comment. I'll remember it by then. But dude, where can people find out a lot more about what you're doing and just to connect with you?
Yeah, look, I'm on LinkedIn, so obviously you can look me up there. Company I'm building is exaforce.com, so feel free to visit us. We have product tours. We'd love to tell you more of what we're doing here.
Yeah, awesome, man. And I'll put those links in the show notes. But thank you so much for joining in, and thank you everyone for tuning in as well. This next time. Thanks, guys. Peace. For listening or watching this episode of Cloud Security Podcast. This was brought to you by TechRiot.io. If you are enjoying episodes on cloud security, you can find more episodes like these on cloudsecuritypodcast.tv, our website, or on social media platforms like YouTube, LinkedIn, and Apple Spotify. In case you are interested in learning about AI security as well, do check out our sister podcast called AI Security Podcast, which is available on YouTube, LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple as well, where we talk to other CISOs and practitioners about what's the latest in the world of AI security. Finally, if you're after a newsletter, it just gives you top news and insight from all the experts we talk to at Cloud Security Podcast. You can check that out on cloudsecurity.newsletter.com. I'll see you in the next episode.